All right, hello everyone. This is Eric Davis with Life Recovery Center. Uh, Very briefly about myself, I'm a clinical social worker and clinical addiction counselor. I'm one of the co-founders of Life Recovery Center, um, which I founded with Tom Prendergast in 2004. And our agency has 5 treatment locations throughout the city of Indianapolis. In addition to my work here as one of the executive directors, I also teach addictions for the IU School of Social Work at IUPUI, as well as the Master of Social Work program at the University of Indianapolis. So I will leave some time for questions at the end. Um, if you have any, please feel free to let me know. So in starting out with this, and let me say this kind of in starting out. What I'm going to talk about today are a few different things. I'm going to talk about things from a 12-step philosophy, obviously, and I'm going to try and simplify the 12-step process for you with an understanding of how it works and why it works the way it does. It's a formula that's been working for many years for many people, and for those of us in the treatment world, it's very hard for individuals to deny that the 12-step fellowships seem to provide the best results the most often. Now, I'll be the first to say that 12-step programs and self-help meetings are not the only way, to get and stay clean and sober, but they absolutely can help for individuals that choose to do it that way. I myself am in recovery. I'm a product of the 12-step fellowship. I had tried everything that I could think of before that, and the 12-step fellowship and becoming involved in working a program is what worked for me. So I'm going to start off with kind of throwing out a different philosophy for you from which to look at addiction. So um, addiction is a thinking illness, or from a 12-step philosophy, it's a disease. Okay, so the disease of addiction is an illness that affects my thinking and my behaviors. Now, an example that I use in how this works is I say, I'll hold up a marker when I'm doing a group therapy session. I hold up a marker and I'll ask the group, I'll say, okay, when I let go of this marker, what's going to happen? And everyone will, say, well, it's going to fall to the floor. And I say, well, how do you know that? And they'll say, because, when we learn about gravity in school, or anytime we've dropped anything, it falls to the floor. And I say, well, today you're in for a treat because I'm going to let go of this and it's going to float. And I always say, what do you guys think when I say that? And, they'll tell me, well, that's, we think you're out of your mind. Some folks will say some things that aren't always very polite. And the point is, it makes me sound crazy. So I'll hold the marker up and I'll let go and it falls to the floor. And then I pick the marker back up and I say, you know what? It's my right hand. It's because I dropped it with my right hand. Let me drop it with my left. It'll float this time. And then I let go of the marker. It falls to the floor. And I'll have fun with it. I'll say, you know what? It's just this whole darn floor. Susie, you look to against the wall because you're throwing the mojo off. I'm going to stand on a chair. Susie's going to look at the wall. It's going to float this time. And I let go. It falls to the floor. So the point that I make, and I ask them, I say, what's the obvious pattern here? And they say, well, it's not going to float. And I say, well, what if I had a thinking disease, if you will, a problem with my thinking process, that no matter how many times I try to do this successfully and fail, there's a part of my mind that tells me it'll work this time. This time will be different, and what that translates into in a real recovery program, or in a real instance of addiction is, it's the drug I'm using. It's this cocaine. If I just smoke pot, I'll be okay. Or, it's the people that I'm hanging out with. If I just hang out with Willie, I'll be all right. The whole point is we have to change everything in recovery, So from a philosophical standpoint, something that I have found is extremely helpful to my clients, as well as to myself as a person in recovery, has been to look at addiction through a different lens. And here's what I always say. Addiction as a whole is considered to be chemical dependency. So, I mean, if you look at, society as a whole, pretty much the definition of addiction is, this person is, eating pills, they develop a physical dependence on those, and when they stop taking them, they get sick, they withdraw. And that's true. That's true. But from a treatment standpoint, I think it's beneficial to separate the two out. And here's what I mean by that. I say that addiction is not chemical dependency. They're two very separate things that work together, obviously. So and the reason I say that is because chemical dependency is absolutely curable. If someone is using heroin and they stop using and they go into withdrawal, they're obviously physically dependent on that. They're chemically dependent. But they can go to Community North and visit my friend Dr. Tim Kelly up there, who's one of the best doctors that I know of as an addictionologist, fantastic guy, and he will detox them. And by the time they leave the hospital, they will be no longer chemically dependent. Their chemical dependency has been cured. So the disease of addiction is the thinking and the behaviors that exist long after the chemical dependency has been cured. And that's what we treat in therapy. We use cognitive behavioral therapy, obviously, because we're treating the cognition and the behavior that goes along with that thinking. So I hope that makes sense. That's just something that I have found to be extremely beneficial. So like I said, addiction is not chemical dependency. It's a disease. Addiction is a thinking disease that consists of the thinking and the behaviors that exist long after chemical dependency has been cured. Studies point to a definite biological or hereditary component, just like any other diseases. There's a big debate, and has been, for my entire career anyway, and I've been in the field a long time, about nature versus nurture. There are definite, I think both play a role, but I do believe that it's possible to be chemically dependent and not be an addict. And I know that sounds like a complete and total paradox, but the example I would use is, if we take my grandma, for instance, because she has pain, if I set grandma on a chair and I feed her Vicodin, every day for, say 6 months, and then I just stop giving it to her, she's going to experience some withdrawal symptoms because she was chemically dependent on that. It's impossible not to be when taking something like that long term. But does that mean that she's an addict? Does she have the thinking and the behaviors that I myself as an addict have? I don't believe so. And I think that addiction is something that we are either born with or we're not. I'm a firm believer that there are some people who are probably, chronic alcoholics or, chronic addicts, but they would never know because they never opened Pandora's box. They never used that first one to set the illness on its course. I can tell you that, addiction, the thinking and the behaviors remain alive and well for a long time, as far as I'm concerned, for the rest of a person's life. I think chemical dependency is cured, and I think that we get a daily reprieve, but I don't think we are ever cured. And that's why individuals who have been clean, 20 or 30 years still go to meetings because they're still treating the illness part, no longer the chemical dependency. And then I always include, one of the ways that I've heard it said best by my friend Charlo Burrell, who works at Fairbanks. He's a recovery coach there. He says, addicts are not bad people trying to be good. They're sick people trying to get well. And I absolutely agree with that. I know it's hard sometimes to see it that way because, by all outward appearances, in all fairness, what does society see? What symptoms of addiction does society typically see? Well, usually the illegal behavior or, the lying, cheating, stealing, manipulating, doing whatever I have to do to get the next fix. And if that's what they see, of course, that's what people are going to judge addiction on as a whole. So the progression of usage, I actually just shared this in group a couple of days ago, and I always have a good time doing this. The progression of usage is something that I have yet to meet a person, who was an addict. And when I say addict, please understand, I mean, that's a term of endearment for me. I identify as an addict. It's not, I don't mean that in a derogatory way in any way, shape, or form. I know there's a big push to say a person afflicted with addiction. So please don't anyone be offended when I say addict. I don't mean it in a bad way. But I've yet to meet an addict who said, I just woke up one day and I decided, man, I really want to screw my life up. So I think I'll start using this or that and burn it all to the ground, and no one ever asks for it. And so it's always interesting to discuss, well, how did we get started on that path? And clients can always relate to this. Okay, so we know that addiction is an illness that progresses as time goes by. It gets worse over time. And here's an example of that. So, and I apologize for the drawings. I'm not a good artist, but it works. So here's this guy, and he is, living his life, and things are okay. And along comes this cute, cuddly little guy, and that's the guy sitting on his shoulder with a big smile on his face. And the person says to his little buddy, says, man, where have you been all my life? This is fantastic. When we hang out together, it seems like the colors are brighter. I don't worry about all the little stuff. I feel like I'm complete for the first time ever. He says, we need to hang out all the time, buddy. You need to come back again. So if you've ever had a cat in your neighborhood, and you wanted to see it again, a surefire way to do that is to simply feed it once, and you're probably going to see him again. So because this guy likes his buddy hanging out, he starts feeding him, so he'll come back. So what happens when we feed, kids or plants? They grow. So what we wind up with is now, here's the person again, and now his buddy's as big as he is. The problem that presents is that sometimes, we have things to do or, bills to pay, and we don't want to hang out with our cute, snuggly buddy. And he fights us off. We say, hey, we really don't want to hang out with you. And he says, yeah, well, I'm hanging out today. And we get in a shoving match, and sometimes we win, sometimes he wins. So as he continues to grow, not only is he more powerful, but we also have to feed him more and more and more because, bigger things eat more. And he continues to grow until eventually we don't have enough food to feed him. So what does he eat? He eats us. And this cute little guy that was so fun in the beginning, that was sitting on our shoulder and, was such a great time, we find out that he has grown into this, hideous, fanged monster who eats us. And this right here, the monster, this is what active addiction looks like. Being in the belly of the beast. And that becomes the top priority. What that translates into in real life in active addiction would be, well, I've got $50 and my daughter wanted that, big wheel that is, on sale, and I've got enough to get that and get her a couple other things for her birthday this weekend. Man, but the monster's hungry. And so all those other things go to the wayside and I have to feed the monster. What's always been fascinating to me as a treatment professional is how often someone will come into my office, for an initial assessment or something like that, and they're at this stage. They're at the monster stage. They've been getting arrested. They're getting in trouble. They're failing drug screens. Everything has been messed up as a result of their using, but they sit there and explain to me how all the reasons that they're here, that they can quit anytime they want. They're not hurting anybody but themselves, and that's always been a fascinating part. So that's what the progression of usage looks like. I firmly believe that, nobody starts out to mess their life up. It's, they get that first time. It's like, wow, I like how this makes me feel. I want to keep doing it. And eventually, it grows to a point where nothing else matters. And actually, addiction comes from a Latin term addictus, which means to give all. Or another way of saying that would be to become a slave to. You know, that's what addiction does. Now, going again on that example, this is what recovery looks like. Recovery looks like, here's our friend, or here's the guy, and the monster has shrunk down to, his smaller size, to where he used to just sit on the guy's shoulder, but he's in a cage now. And this is what recovery looks like, in that there's a few catches. Number one, the monster will never die. We have to carry him everywhere we go, no matter what, at all times. We can't just, set him down in the corner and walk away and leave him there, and he doesn't bother us anymore. So we have to carry him in the cage. And the other part of that is we have to do maintenance on the cage. And, I'll talk more about what that maintenance is as far as a 12-step program goes. But from a 12-step philosophy, this is completely and totally what recovery looks like. We're never cured. Life gets better, but recovery comes down to some decisions that we make, on a daily basis. There's different sayings like just for today, fake it till you make it, act as if, things of that nature. But at no point do the fellowships believe that we are cured, because cured, in my opinion, would mean that I could now use successfully. I always jokingly say, hey, if they come out with a pill tomorrow that I can use successfully, drinks on me, but that hasn't happened yet, and I highly doubt that that's going to happen in my lifetime. So let's talk about 12-step meetings for a moment. That's where the 12-step philosophy comes from. It all started with Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it was in 1934. A guy named Bill Wilson and a gentleman, he was a medical doctor, Dr. Bob Smith. They were the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Bill Wilson met Dr. Bob, and they started figuring out things that worked. They were both alcoholics and put together a program that actually worked. And, it's grown into what it is today. Well, the 12 steps, the program was so powerful that people who were addicted to things other than alcohol started going to some of the meetings and just replacing the word alcohol with their own drug of choice, whatever it was. And they found that the steps worked for that too. So what we have today is, dozens and dozens and dozens of self-help groups or anonymous groups. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous, Pills Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, and that has even branched off into groups or self-help groups for family members of those who are struggling with addiction. And that's like, Al-Anon, Narc-Anon, Nar-Anon, Alateen, all those different things. And if you're interested in seeing what a lot of them are, you can go to my agency's website. It's liferecoverycenter.net. Go to resources and click on links, and the first several links will be, self-help meetings. There are now online self-help meetings. There's a great resource as far as that goes, and the internet has really helped the 12-step community to expand even further. It's a lot easier to find meetings now. There's apps you can download for your phone. So in looking at the 12 steps, I won't go through each single one. I'm more than happy to send a copy of this PowerPoint out to each of you when we're finished, along with your CEU certificate. So, but basically, I'm going to kind of break this down for you as far as I have seen. And as you can see, there are sections of this. And it's all about, well, let me kind of skip ahead. Okay, so if you've ever seen the show My Name is Earl, he's working the step where he made direct amends to such people whenever possible, etc. That's what that whole show is centered on. So here is the 12 steps simplified, and this is not something that you'll find in in any book other than one I wrote. Um, so the first three steps are the foundation. That's where I admit I'm powerless, come to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity, and make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him, or her, or them, whatever it is. So a simple way of saying that is I can't, that's step one. I can't, he, she, it, they can, I'll let them. So the first three steps are really about the serenity prayer, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We say that at the end of a lot of meetings because it's a great reminder of what the crux of our problem really is. And I firmly believe that, one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? One of the biggest issues that we as addicts have is that we spend all of our time trying to control things which we have no control over in the first place, rather than realizing that it's and I'll talk more about fighting Mike Tyson is what I call it, but there's a term called surrender to win, and that's what that's about. It's simply being able to identify that, hey, I'm in control of me, everybody else is in control of them, so I need to work on me and live and let live. So in steps 1 through 3, that's where we build the foundation. Okay. What happens a lot, and there's a term for this that we use in the program, we call it the 3-step shuffle. And what will happen is a person will work step 1, step 2, step 3, relapse. 1, 2, 3, relapse. 1, 2, 3, relapse, etc. The reason that happens is because those first 3 steps are the most important ones. They are indispensable. Those are the steps that, have to be worked all day, every day. They're non-negotiable. In step 4 is where we start with making searching a fearless moral inventory of ourselves, admitting to God, ourselves, another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. We ask God to remove our shortcomings and our defects of character. And something on that, I get asked a lot of times, people will say, well, what's the difference between shortcomings and defects of character? Like, aren't they kind of one and the same? And the answer is yeah. But what's always made sense for me is because recovery is all about balance. So I can't have a shortcoming of one thing unless I have too much of another. So it's about balancing those things out. For example, if I have a character defect of ego, that means I'm too egotistical, then I have a shortcoming of humility. So it's like the scales. In steps 8 and 9, that's where we actually clean up the mess that we made as a result of our addiction. That's where we make a list of all people we've harmed and become willing to make amends. And then we make amends to them, unless to do so will injure, them or others or ourselves. And then in steps 10 through 12, these are the maintenance steps, where we maintain conscious contact with, God of our understanding through prayer and meditation, etc. Carry the message to others. That the maintenance is I keep doing all of these things and I integrate them into my daily life. Now, here's something that I think you'll find interesting. I used to work at Fairbanks years ago, and I worked on the inpatient unit with the men there. So I'd have men that would come in, and they're detoxing, or they're, typically they didn't feel very good, they're sad, etc. And part of what I had to end up doing a lot of times, and this is back before cell phones, if that gives you any indication how old I am, but there was a payphone in the hallway at Fairbanks. And these guys would, I would hear them in the hallway and they're on the phone, and I hear them saying this, I swear I'll never do it again. I'm so sorry. I'll never drink again. All that. And it's like, okay, man, hey, come here. Let's hang up the phone. Come in here and talk to me for a minute. And I would always say to them, well, how many times have you said that to your wife before? And they'd say, a lot. And I would say, well, why would this time be any different? Well, because I really mean it this time. I really do. Well, have you ever meant it before? Then the answer is yes. And what I would point out to them is, look, the reason that from a 12-step standpoint, we don't even start making amends till steps 8 and 9 is because by the time we get to steps 8 and 9, through working steps all the way from 1 to 7, the people that we owe an amends to can already see that we're serious. They can see that we're sorry. And my dad used to say something to me that I hated hearing it at the time, but it's so true. He would say that, your behavior is screaming so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. And I repeat that all the time. And that's what I would tell those gentlemen at Fairbanks that, I know you meant you were sorry, but you got to fix this problem, start working on this problem, and then they'll know you're sorry when it's time to tell them that. Okay, so I hope that makes sense and takes some of the magic out. The 12 steps, they're very simple, but they're actually, it's a daily program for living. And that's what people don't realize a lot of times is there's two ways that we work steps. We work them formally on paper with a sponsor, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment, and we work them informally by integrating them into our daily life, etc. Okay, so sponsorship. A sponsor is simply a guide. It's someone who shares their experience, strength, and hope, someone who's been where, I'm at as a person, in active addiction, getting clean, and they can show me how to live clean and sober. Okay, and I'm going to revisit all these in just a bit, but that's what a sponsor is. Okay, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. All right, that's the how of the program, how it works. What this translates into in a real recovery program is being honest about what I do and don't know, about recovery. Am I planning a relapse in my head? What's the truth? Am I struggling? Am I doing okay? So I'm honest with people that can understand. I'm open-minded to the feedback that they give me, and then I'm willing to take the suggestions. And really, the literature, the recovery literature says that with these three, we are well on our way. If a person can do these three things, a 12-step recovery will work great for them because it's a tried and true proven formula that hasn't changed in many years because it hasn't had to. It works. Okay. And then with the higher power, a lot of times I've had many clients through the years who, when they get to the word God in the steps, it's like they just shut down because sometimes, people come into treatment, they're angry at God or, they're an atheist or agnostic. So something that I heard years ago that's been helpful for individuals who are struggling with that is to just look at the letters, G-O-D, good orderly, and it can stand for any number of things, but it can stand for good orderly direction, which means I just do the right thing, group of drunks, group of drug addicts, the key is a higher power is all about the answers coming from somewhere other than ourselves. And that's because we have a saying in the program. We say, my best thinking got me this seat right here, when we're sitting in meetings. And that's because that's the truth. If I had known how to stay clean and sober, I would have, gotten clean and sober and stayed clean and sober much sooner than I did. It was only after I had exhausted everything I could come up with that I did something that worked. And the answer came from somewhere else, So that's an important thing. And fellowship, spending time with and learning from others in recovery. We call that people say go to the meetings after the meetings. And what that means is you go to a 12-step meeting, and you're at the meeting. And then afterwards, there'll be a group of people a lot of times that'll go to like Denny's or Waffle House or somewhere that's open late and kind of hang out. And it's about integrating these like-minded individuals, into my life. And I always make sure and share this because, When I first got clean, I was scared to death. It was like, I don't, what type of people am I going to be hanging out with, or whatever, and totally had all the judgment. And what's ironic is my best friends, to this day, are the people that I met through meetings years ago. That's how I met Tom, who's my business partner, one of my best friends in the world. Um, and the list goes on and on. I mean, most of my friends that I still have to this day are friends in recovery, because the friends that I was using with, they disappeared. I wasn't fun to them anymore, and unfortunately, many of them are in prison or passed away. So fellowship. Now, relapse. Relapse is something that happens when a person has experienced a significant amount of clean time. If they were clean for a couple of days and then used again, that's more of a break. That's not really a relapse. So a person who has some recovery or has some knowledge of recovery, and they go back and use again, my definition is relapse is the result of a pre-existing condition, halts, okay, wherein an individual use it as an excuse to get high. So what that means is relapse only happens because I use something as an excuse to justify it. In the very beginning, I had a relapse, and it was because the bottom line was I wasn't done using. I didn't want to be done, and I was just kind of made a decision. Well, I'll just go back to doing this. But I believe now that relapse happens because something is out of whack. Okay, and let's talk about what that would be. So these are relapse warning signs according to the recovery literature. And it says, if we're too hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or serious, we need to halt what we're doing and take a look at our recovery program. And I mean, this is very true, all of these things. Now, the reason that, let me go with this. So the solutions to these things are very simple. Obviously the solution to being hungry is to eat. The solution to being angry is to, vent, to talk about what's going on. The cure for loneliness is fellowship, or being around other people, reaching out to others. The cure for being tired is to get some sleep or rest. And the cure for being, what I call terminally serious, if that makes any sense, where people just aren't having it. There is no joy. This is serious business, and nothing's funny, nothing's fun. It's just when a person becomes terminally serious, that's a pretty good indicator that things are wrong, or that something's bothering them. So the good news for individuals in recovery is that 12-step meetings are a one-stop shop for relapse prevention. And that's because if we go back here to these solutions that counteract these relapse warning signs, a 12-step meeting covers every single one of those in one fell swoop. Now, here's what that means. So, hungry, eat. Sometimes they'll have food at 12-step meetings, but I also think that hungry can mean hungry for recovery knowledge, hungry for fellowship, like hungry for any number of things. And I'm going to get that at that meeting. It's going to feed my recovery. It's going to give me some knowledge that's applicable that I can use. Now, angry, the cure is to vent, to talk about it. That's what meetings are for. It's a chance for a person to go to a meeting and talk about what's going on, or to vent their frustrations or their feelings, to get some guidance, etc. Lonely, it's possible for individuals to go into, a football stadium and feel alone, but it's a lot easier to feel alone by yourself typically than when you're with others. So, that speaks to the fellowship, where there are like-minded individuals who understand, etc. Now, also, I always laugh with clients. I say, I hope you're not sleeping through meetings. But if you go to meetings, it is, an hour and a half or an hour, whatever that meeting is, that you can just sit there and kind of shut off the outside world and focus strictly on, our own stuff and our own recovery. And then, 12-step meetings are typically fun because people are say funny things, and every now and then they'll tell a joke or stuff like that. I mean, it's just after a while, it's like hanging out with your friends because that's who the individuals are. It becomes a social circle, and that's fun. It's fun to go to meetings. So, the 12-step meetings provide an ongoing solution for all of the relapse warning signs, and that's one of the reasons that I think 12-step recovery is so effective. Now, in talking about relapse, I want to share with you what I call the recovery raft. And from a 12-step perspective, this is typically how relapse happens. This is more often than not what it looks like. And you're going to have more of my absolutely beautiful drawings. So that guy probably looks familiar, from being in the belly of the beast. This is a man who's drowning. He's out in the middle of the ocean, and there is no land anywhere in sight. And he's, just now going under the water, and he feels hopeless. He thinks, even if I start swimming, there's no land anywhere. I may as well just give up hope. And this little tiny ember of hope is kind of surviving a little bit in the back of his brain. Well, lo and behold, a little current comes along and it pushes him back up to the top, and his face comes out of the water, and he gets a big breath. And that little ember of hope really starts to kind of flame up. And he thinks, you know what? Maybe I don't have to die. Maybe I don't have to die. Maybe there's hope for me for some reason. And so he says a foxhole prayer, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's a term, for like when the soldier was in a foxhole, he'd say, hey, if you'll get me out of this one, I'll do whatever it takes. And that's kind of what this guy says. This guy says, look, God and higher power, if you're out there, if you'll help me out, I promise I'll do whatever I have to do. And lo and behold, a big gigantic ship appears. Okay, it's a great big freighter. There's an anchor hanging off the front of it. And this boat comes alongside him, and there's a guy up on the boat, and the boat is just full of people. The man hollers down to the guy in the water, and he says, hey, do you need help? And the man in the ocean says, oh no, not at all. I'm just out here swimming, having the time of my life. Of course I need help. I'm drowning, And the man on the boat says, okay, well, there's some good news and some bad news. And the man in the water says, okay, well, can you tell me what the bad news is? The guy says, yeah. The bad news is there's too many people on the boat, and we have absolutely no room for you on here. The only way I could bring you on this boat is to throw somebody overboard, and I can't do that. But the good news is I have some boards and some rope that I can throw over the side. It still won't make enough room for you to get on our boat, but I'll throw the boards and the rope over, and I'll tell you how to build a raft, and you can follow us to land because that's where we're going. And the guy says, well, that's fantastic. Yeah, please. So the man on the boat throws over a piece of rope, and he says, hey, this rope is fellowship. Hang on to this because this is what's going to tie it all together. The guy in the water says, okay. The man throws over a board. This is a funny looking raft, but bear with me. It's a recovery raft, okay? So the guy on the boat throws the first board over, and he says, hey, this first board is 12-step meetings. The man in the water says, well, what are those? And the boat guy says, well, the 12-step meetings are self-help meetings where, people in recovery come together to discuss, experience, strength, and hope, and dealing with the common problem. He said, think of it kind of like you would a war room, where like the generals gather in the war room to talk about what they're going to do to fight this enemy, what worked, what didn't work. He said it's kind of like that, but they're talking about the disease of addiction and how to get through it. They'll share what worked for them, what didn't work for them, maybe things people need to watch out for, etc. The guy says, okay. And he says, when are those? The man on the boat says, well, the good news is those are everywhere all the time. Pretty much any town, anywhere is going to have a decent amount of 12-step meetings. And the guy says, okay. Then on the boat throws over the second board. And he says, this second board is a sponsor. Says, at the 12-step meetings you're going to, you need to get a sponsor. And the man says, well, what's a sponsor? And he says, well, a sponsor is simply a guide. It's someone who's been where you're at, who can teach you a new way, and teach you how to work a recovery program. And the man says, okay, I think I kind of understand that. The guy on the boat says, well, kind of think of it like this. If you were having to go into a forest that you've never been in before, wouldn't it be awesome if somebody who's been in that forest for a while would meet you at the edge, and they take you by the hand and they say, hey, you know what? I've been in this forest now for a few years, and I'm going to show you, where the berries that you can eat are, and where the dangerous animals that are going to try and get you are, where the ravines are that you need to watch out for. They're going to show you how to safely navigate that forest. And recovery is no different. Early recovery is very scary because a person's really not sure how to handle, a number of things or what to do. And a sponsor is someone who's been living that for a while, who can tell them, a sponsor serves two purposes, actually. One is to be, a guide, someone to talk to, someone who can offer guidance, etc. They're also the person that teaches their sponsee how to work those steps, and the sponsee becomes accountable to them to work those steps. And that is very helpful. It's like links in a chain. If you have a sponsor and a sponsee, you're kind of locked in from both sides. It gives some accountability, and accountability is a great thing in recovery. So the guy climbs up on the raft, and the man on the boat throws over a third board. He says, this third board is the 12 steps, the actual steps themselves, the program. And the guy says, the program? He says, yeah, people say you need to work the program. What they're talking about is those 12 steps. And the guy says, okay, well, what are those? He said, really they're a program for daily living, just like we talked about earlier. He says, those will teach you, how to live life clean and sober and feel happy, joyous, and free without the use of substances. And the guy says, okay. He says, so you need to, as you're going to 12-step meetings, you need to work those steps with your sponsor. He says, all right, I can do that. The fourth board's thrown over. And he says, this board is honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I covered this earlier, but, it means you need to be honest about what you do and don't know, open-minded to the feedback that's given, and willing to take the suggestions. He said that the people that you'll meet in the fellowships that are clean and sober, they're not special. They're no better or worse than anybody else. They just accepted the help. That's the big difference. So, accepting the help that's how we do it. Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. The guy says, okay, no problem. He throws another board over. And he says, this board is a higher power, or a power greater than yourself, if you will. He says, in this example, it's really easy because we're the higher power. The boat is a power greater than you. We have provided you with supplies that you didn't have before. We've provided you with options that you didn't have before. And we're teaching you how to do something that you didn't know how to do before, and it's helping you. You're staying clean. The guy says, yeah, you're right. This is great. The man says, okay, so I want you to tie this all together with fellowship because, just like tying it all into your life, this is what's going to keep everything together. You need to integrate this into your daily life. Hang out with others who are doing the same thing because nobody wants to be an oddball. Nobody likes to be the square peg in the round hole. And the guy says, okay. So he ties that all together, and life is good. He is, somebody else just joined us. He is, following the boat to shore, and everything is fantastic. And then he starts doing this magic thing that addicts do. It's the crux of our problem. He starts to think. And like we talked about, he has a thinking illness. So, he starts doing, he's feeling so good on the raft. He does push-ups. He gets some muscles, he's feeling better. He grows hair. His hair's, waving in the wind. And the point here is that life is good. He's got it together. He's staying clean and sober. He doesn't feel terrible, about himself anymore. His boss is starting to kind of come around and say, hey, you keep doing a good job, you'll get a promotion. The kids are starting to trust him again. Life at home is good, and he starts thinking, like I said. And he starts thinking, this is all cool and all, but man, I kind of miss my old friends. I am so sick and tired of hanging out with nobody but recovering addicts. I'm just tired of it. I need a change. So he takes his fellowship rope and he throws it into the water. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was trying to avoid addicts in recovery, the last place on earth I would probably go to is 12-step meetings. So he stops going to meetings because he doesn't want to fellowship with those folks anymore. So throws the meetings into the ocean. Now, they have a saying in the fellowships. They say, if you're working the 12 steps by yourself, your sponsor is an idiot. Okay? Because that means that I'm sponsoring myself, and if I knew how to work a recovery program, I wouldn't be here in the first place. And I know enough to know, left to my own thinking, things aren't going to turn out well. I need that support and accountability at all times, even to this day. I have a sponsor to this day. I talk to him all the time. And also, he knows that his sponsor is going to tell him, you need to go back to the meetings. Have you lost your mind? So he avoids his sponsor, and that disappears. So he's no longer working the steps because he doesn't have a sponsor. And so that goes into the water. Now, would you agree that he is not being honest about the true nature and depth of his problem? Now, keep in mind, he was almost dead before. He was drowning. He was grasping to life by a thread, and the boat came along. He asked for help. The boat came along, and they provided him all the help he needed, But he's not being honest about that. He's got it together, he thinks. He's not being open-minded to what the folks on the boat, told him to do, and he's not being willing to maintain the raft that they helped him to build. So that goes into the water. And would you also agree that, I said earlier that one of the most important parts of 12-step recovery is, getting the answers from somewhere other than me. And he's completely going against what the individuals on the boat taught him. So the higher power goes away. All right. And what happens when we pull a raft out from under somebody in water? There's a big splash and all that. And now this person is right back where he started, wondering, how on earth did I get back here? The boat is long gone. The raft is dismantled. The pieces have all floated away, and he's drowning all over again. So that's the question that I always, proposed. How did he get back there? Well, he got back there because denial is a very important element that we have to deal with in regard to addiction. And denial. Don't even notice I am lying. The truth is, I mentioned at the very beginning of this that, a lot of times people come in and they're in active addiction. They got all sorts of things going on. They're in the belly of the beast, but they will proceed to tell me how it's not a problem. I don't know why everybody's so worried about me. I just made a mistake, and I can quit anytime I want, etc. The truth is, they really believe that at that time. I think they really believe that. They don't even notice they're lying. They're not lying on purpose necessarily. And with the example of the guy on the raft, his denial was so strong that he failed to remember that the only reason he wasn't drowning was because of that raft. It's like, And I see that happen all the time. People will start going to meetings, they start working a program, they start doing everything they need to do, and everything starts to get better. And as soon as it's better enough, oh, I don't need any of that stuff anymore. And it's kind of like, I always point out too, it's like, if you know anybody that works out profusely, um, and is just, ripped, they look like a bodybuilder. It's like, once they get to that point, they have to maintain that. If they stop, they don't just continue to look like that. It goes away. And recovery is the same way. If I stop working on it, if I stop maintaining it, it's going to go in the opposite direction, because we're either recovering or we're relapsing. There is no in between. I'm doing stuff for my recovery or I'm not. So those things, and these will look familiar because these are the boards on the raft, but these are what I call the 6 elements of 12-step recovery. The big 6, if you will. There's the 12-step meetings, the sponsorship, step work, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, higher power, and fellowship. So, any questions? And I think you guys are both muted, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
I want to make a comment. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you, Vicki.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I came in right on denial, which is, I hate that I got in so late, but that's probably all that I really, really, really needed to. I guess I heard what I really need to hear, but I appreciate the fact that don't even notice I'm lying. Is I'm glad that you described it this way, because all week we've been talking about it. And then when you went in, the perfect example of the person that works out and they get buff and then they quit doing it because they're right where they need to be, and then they go back. They go back instead of moving forward because they don't maintain. Just hearing that alone, I'm gonna keep that and I'm gonna give it away.
Awesome! I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I was wondering, what does it take to, like, I work at a university counseling center, and a lot of times what I hear from the students is that they can't find a 12-step, or they try to go and then they have a really hard time finding like people like them, so like age group and things like that will kind of match. And how do you start one on campus, or is that a possibility to even start one on campus?
It is.
So that
as far as starting, you have to go through like the NA World Services or AA. You have to. There's like a hierarchy, so they would need to. Basically, I would have them look up whatever the fellowship is, in the phone book or online, and call, because the person that answers the phone will be able to tell them what they would have to do to start a meeting. I can speak also to kind of what you're saying. I'm guessing that they're young adults, probably early 20s. Is that?
Yeah, between 18 and 21.
Yeah, I me personally, I got clean right before I turned 22. So I mean, I was
Okay.
I was a pup when I got clean, and it is difficult then, because one of the things I kind of ran into was, well, where are all the young adults like me, because unfortunately people don't usually get it right when they're young. So, but what I can tell you is there are a plethora of young people out there who are in recovery. It just takes a lot of looking.
Okay.
So, but they are out there, I promise.
Okay. All right.
All right. Any other questions, anyone?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, you guys. I will. I'll be sending out your CEU certificate, and I'll also just include a PDF of the PowerPoint. And if you think of any questions after the fact or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm an open book, probably too open sometimes, because I'm sure sometimes people think, man, I wish I hadn't asked him that that question. You know, if it's a question about addiction, I will tell you everything that I've learned through my career or know personally. So please consider me a resource if ever needed, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, I got one quick question because I didn't get in this webinar early enough to get the CEUs. However, I still would like the PowerPoint.
Yeah, no problem.
If I can get it.
I'll send you the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks again, you guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.